We're here today, obviously, because we have a crisis in the metropolitan area regarding crime. You know, you've been reporting on the crime increases for the past 2 years. It's no secret homicides are at a record rate. Last year in the state of Minnesota, of course, we had a homicide yesterday in Maplewood. Last couple days ago, a small child was beaten to death in Maplewood and burned then in a bathtub. There's a lot of things going on in the crime world, and the limits of law enforcement's ability to address these are being tested every day. We made that point to the legislature this last session. Everyone knows that there were many, many bills brought forward. There was a ton of enthusiasm to address the crime problem in Minnesota. I spent many hours up there myself. We found the responses were relatively positive, but of course, none of the bills that would have helped us address this crime problem got over the finish line. And we've heard from legislative leaders now for the last 5 months that maybe next session when we see who's in charge. Well, I'm here to tell you we do not have another 5 to 6 months to curb what's happening. You'll see in my letter there I reference Minneapolis. We work closely with them. As I stand here right now, Chief O'Hara, or designee Chief O'Hara, is being interviewed by the Minneapolis City Council. In my letter, you'll see that I've made this point, and I've been at this for 45 years. My sole ambition in life is to try to make things safer and better so people can enjoy their lives and go about their own business. It's the same for Under Sheriff Mike Martin. It's part of our identity. It's part of why we're doing it. So are we frustrated? Yes, we're frustrated because right now we do not have the resources to get the job done. Chief O'Hara, Commissioner Cedric Alexander, they cannot succeed. They cannot succeed because they're down 300 officers. You cannot curb crime without the bodies and the resources to make that happen. And that is a critical need we're going to talk about here in terms of retention and incentives to get people into law enforcement. When I came on in 1977 with Commissioner John Harrington, there were 1,891 people taking the test in 1976. You can look it up. The Pioneer Press had a picture of all of us in the floor of the old Civic Center. 1,891 people. Last year, the St. Paul Police Department had 75 applicants. We here at the Sheriff's Office, we had 26 applicants. The North St. Paul Police Chief just lost 3 out of his 18, and he has no applicants. So we're in a crisis, but it's not just us. The point of this whole thing is we have a small chance to put the fire out. The fire is burning, and it's really burning in our core cities and worse in Minneapolis than it is here in St. Paul. Everything that happens in Minneapolis impacts the rest of the metropolitan area. It's the jewel of our state. 3 professional teams. My wife and I used to go to the Capitol Grill down there off of Hennepin on a monthly basis. There's other great restaurants there, Ruth Chris, Manny's. I can't get my wife to go to downtown Minneapolis because of the current crime trends. And if you watch the physical confrontation and beatings that occur off of Hennepin and First on video, you wouldn't want to go either. Chief Nadeau's son, of course, was beaten. Chief Nadeau from Maplewood, who was also in St. Louis Park. That person was convicted yesterday. I think he's getting sentenced here soon. But here's the point. The legislature has $12 billion in surplus. $12 billion in surplus. They agreed last May to spend $250 million to protect the citizens of Minnesota. But they couldn't agree on how to spend it. Couldn't get it over the finish line. I'm calling on the governor, the legislative leaders, House Majority, House Speaker, Senate Majority, Warren Limmer, and others to get together and work the problem and get a special session done. There will be arguments, well, we should wait till the new people are elected. Even if they only fund law enforcement between now and July 1st for the rest of this biennium, even if they only do that and wait for the other decisions to be made later, we have a chance of curbing the fire. Now, carjackings are way high. I'm going to introduce you here to John. He doesn't want his last name known, but John's wife was carjacked in Minneapolis. He's been an advocate for a special session since June when he came out publicly saying we have to do something. And you'll hear his story. I want you to hear a little bit about how it's impacted his life as well. And then I'm going to talk about juvenile crime because there are many parts to the solution here. People talk about the courts and the justice system, and I say, amen, we need to hold people accountable. No doubt, prosecutors and judges need to hold young kids accountable. Majority of our violent crime is caused by juveniles. Majority of our violent crime is caused by juveniles, and we have almost a hands-off approach, I'm saying Minnesota, in terms of holding them accountable. We have 450 people in our adult jail next door. In the juvenile detention center right now, we have 35, even though a majority of our violent crime is by juveniles. So we're going to need to talk about ways to hold people accountable, but we can't hold people accountable until we catch them. Catching offenders is a critical part of our job, and with the limited resources we have, God knows we have a difficult time preventing crime, but in the old days, we used to actually solve it. We used to have a high percentage of catching people. So I'm going to turn it over to John, and John is going to share his story. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity and for bringing attention to what's really needed. What happened to my wife, my 6-year-old daughter, and 6-year-old niece should never happen in Minnesota. This is not the Minnesota that I know and love. Over the last few years, it's gotten really bad. I had no idea how bad it was until this incident happened. So my wife, after Sunday school, at about 11:30, was bringing my daughter, again 6-year-old daughter and 6-year-old niece, to have a pastry after Sunday school. She parked on a side street in Uptown. She went to let my niece out of the car. When she looked up, there were 2 men dressed to conceal their identity, one with a gun, pointing at my wife, demanding the keys to her car. My 6-year-old daughter was still strapped in the vehicle. My wife was a hero in this case. She pleaded with them at first, then made enough noise and fought with them to make it so that her, my 6-year-old daughter and 6-year-old niece were safe. She broke her finger. They stole her purse. They stole her wallet. There are a number of other heroes from the neighborhood that came out because she made enough noise so they could come out and help. The people that went after her got into the getaway car. They smashed a number of vehicles and left. They still to this day have not been caught. I'm so thankful my wife did what she did to save our daughter and niece from what could have happened. But what happened to us, our family, and likely a number of other folks that have heard our story, we're all victimized. Thinking about going to downtown Minneapolis to see a Twins game this summer, there's no way we're doing that again. To go out and do a number of the things that we'd love to do in that great city, it's changed how we view what we do. Even in our community, there was a recent carjacking at Target of a high school girl. This hits home. This hits really hard. We need to do something. And after this happened to my wife, I had a chance to talk to the Minneapolis police officer. I had no idea how bad this was, but what he had told me, and what I confirmed later, is that this is a daily occurrence. Carjackings, people getting robbed on the street, it's happening daily. And you don't see it, it's not out there as much because it happens so often. You can look it up, I found. Facebook, there's a Crime Watch group that talks about all the different things that are happening on a daily occurrence. It is happening daily. And we need to take action. The other thing that was a surprise, and I talked to the officer after this happened to my wife, is that carjacking is not a specific crime. In my wife's case, they wrote that up as a purse snatching. Her car wasn't taken. Her purse was. Right, so this wouldn't even be registered today as one of the carjacking incidents in our state. So I dug into it further and found that the Minnesota Senate had pulled together a crime bill that went after some really key elements, because I wanted to find something that we could do to make change. And the big things that I found that really resonated in this bill, the first thing is we need more officers. As we just heard, we don't have enough in Minneapolis. Across the board, we're losing the battle right now. We need to retain who we have. We have some great officers that we need to keep. We also need to recruit more officers. What you just shared with the number of officers that used to fill up a stadium now could fill up maybe this conference room we're in is crazy to me to hear that. And then also, we need to find a way to deal with the public relations side of things. Police officers over the last couple of years have been given a bad name, and that makes me so sad. We need to work on that. So that was part of the bill. The other part was making carjacking a specific crime, putting in minimum mandatory sentences, because as a parent, I know you've got to have a consequence to some actions, and if they don't have them, if they get right back out, they're going to do it again. Then on top of that, finding a way to bring them through the legal process with the number of clerks that are needed, and having the justice system show transparency of what they did to prosecute or not is really important to me. But overall, I'm really happy that you brought this up again. I've reached out to Governor Walz. I've reached out to my local, state, Senate, and House members, and I've asked my friends and family to do the same.
Talk about the impact on your wife now when she's driving around, and how what's in her mind.
That's a great point. Yeah. So even to this day, so my wife, she's today she's gonna be going to the same that same Sunday school. It's on a Wednesday, and thinking about what she will or won't do. Like, for example, she wants to bring our dog for a walk while my daughter's at Sunday school. I'm not doing that anymore. It's not safe. Thinking about, when we go to, even going to Target and where you park and what you think about, it's changed the dynamics of what we will or won't do. And it's had a lasting impact on our family. And, the fact that my 6-year-old daughter and 6-year-old niece had this loss of innocence, to see someone pointing a gun at my wife. My older daughter, who wasn't there at the time, asked me that night, "Daddy, do you think he was going to shoot Mommy?" So that's really hard to have come up. And that loss of innocence shouldn't happen. This is not the Minnesota that I grew up in, not the Minnesota that we should have. We got to take action now. We have the money to do it. And as I asked for, even in June, let's get something done. Let's not make this partisan. Let's go after it now. Get the resources out there to fight this thing. We got to start winning this battle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the wall there, you'll see an article about the Ramsey County Carjacking Unit. And as a part of that legislation, there was a proposal for $3 million to be used metro-wide to organize a group that would target carjackers and serious violent crime. Mike Martin is the undersheriff in charge of our proactive and apprehension efforts. This is a unit under his supervision. We currently have the highest carjacking solvable rate. 38% of our carjackings in Ramsey County are solved. You'll see that in the rest of the country, it's probably 10%. Hennepin County's numbers are, and it's only because we have a dedicated unit and we've dedicated resources to make this happen. We happen to have a grant from the state of Minnesota to help us accomplish that through the Auto Theft Prevention Unit. But without funding for that in the metro area, we're going to continue to just be languishing to figure out how we catch these offenders. And so Mike spent 5 years as the inspector in charge of the 4th Precinct in Minneapolis, for those of you that don't know him. He's a gang expert. He's also on the Minnesota Violent Crime, the VSET committee, and he's on the Ramsey County leadership group for violence reduction. And no one probably is in a better position to talk about what he sees in Minneapolis from his sources and his own life experience. So Mike Martin.
Thanks. I've been a cop for more than 30 years. I still travel all over the country and train officers. specifically in reducing violent crime, how to investigate those cases, how to track intelligence on criminal organizations. And I used to brag about the Twin Cities and how safe we were, and especially downtown Minneapolis. What a great, vibrant downtown we had. Now I warn my own boys who are college age not to go down there at night. I have to dissuade them because I've seen what happens. Last night, we had a 16-year-old carjacking and auto theft and robbery suspect that we apprehended. I was there, pulled a gun out of his pants. Thank goodness someone cooperated and let us know that he was in the area. But we're at a critical point in the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota. We have a new chief and a new commissioner of public safety in Minneapolis. There will soon be a new chief in the city of St. Paul. It's time for us to regain public safety in the Twin Cities. And as the Twin Cities go, so goes the rest of the state. I know we've heard that a lot, but our criminal element does not stay in one jurisdiction. We are constantly going back and forth across the river and out to the suburbs. I've been in Eagan, Bloomington, Maple Grove, New Brighton. I've been all over the Twin Cities metro area lately chasing carjackers and people who are violent criminals, quite frankly. And as the sheriff said, a lot of them are juveniles. And we need to have a way that we can get these juveniles in custody, obviously hold them accountable for the offenses, but also get them the intense treatment that they need. Everyone will tell you they need mental health treatment. They need chemical dependency treatment. A lot of them are not in school since the pandemic started. You've seen the numbers that have dropped in the standardized testing because we have so many kids that just aren't engaged in school anymore. And that those schools are where they have adults that are positive role models that will keep them on the right path, a teacher, a coach, a counselor at school. But we can't start that process without the tools to do it right. As the sheriff mentioned, we had legislation that we supported that had bipartisan support to allow us to track stolen vehicles. If someone reports their vehicle is stolen, that we can use technology to track that vehicle as opposed to having to engage in a pursuit that's very risky at times. So, but that didn't go through. We supported legislation for small group homes for kids where they could be housed there as opposed to going to an outstate facility and get the treatment that they need locally. And that fell through. We don't have the tools that we need to track violent criminals across jurisdictions. We need better coordination amongst the agencies. And all those tools exist. We're just not taking advantage of them, and they're not funded. And we need the legislature to take action and to fund the things that we're proposing. And also, we need to focus on recruitment. As the sheriff said, we need to encourage young people especially to get involved in policing. We want to move forward and to evolve and have police officers that are from our communities, that understand the values that we respect and that we represent. But we can't do that when people are denigrating the police and blaming all the police for the horrible incidents that have occurred in the past, but by a few officers. So, and part of that is funding educational programs throughout the state that train police officers, that recruit officers, and serve as the pipeline into our profession.
Thank you. I'm going to see if Tisha's ready to come out, but before I introduce her, let me just say that if you read the letter that I sent, part of the problem is we've closed every facility in the metro area to treat and house young youth. You know, Boys Totem Town, they made a decision to close in 2015. The Hennepin County Homeschool. If you were to actually research that history, what we would find is that there was agreement that they should open a merge facility in Richfield. Only problem is they closed everything without getting agreement on the Richfield facility, so really we have nothing. And this is costing us. You will hear the refrain that we don't want kids to go into detention. Let's just be real clear. I'm an expert on juvenile crime, and I can tell you that juvenile detention helps children. It helps get them off of the chemicals they're on. It helps them get mental health treatment. It helps them get away from the negative influences in their lives, sometimes internal with their home, sometimes with their friends. It helps them get an education. They get their GED while they're there. A 3 to 6 to 9 month program for juveniles is immeasurably helpful. And sometimes kids need to sit down and get away. Now I'm going to introduce you to one mom who I hired her actually. I literally have chased and arrested her son many times. And he was the cutest kid probably on the block. And he had a personality that wouldn't stop. And last time he and I had lunch together, he spent an hour telling me about the Longmire program that he's been watching while he was in detention. And of course, unfortunately, he's detained again. But I don't want her to talk so much about her son. She leads a mother's group. We've organized mothers to talk about what their kids need. A lot of them are in denial. Some of them want help. Most want help. But Tisha, can you come forward and just tell them what you're seeing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for me being able to be a voice. Like Bob was saying, my son, he's been committing these crimes since 2019. We're going on 2 years. It's like we're spinning the wheels. Nothing's getting done. My son he went to Moorhead for 12 months. He just recently got out October 5th. He went on a whole week of crime with his friends, and they want to let my son out. The juvenile courts want to let my son out. These kids are constantly committing crimes that adults don't even think about doing. And when they get caught, they get released back to us with no wraparound services, no sponsor, no advocate, no help. It doesn't make sense. It's sad. I'm scared for myself. I'm scared for other people in the community. These kids need to be accountable into a rehabilitation where they're going to get the help and treatment and rewired before they get put back into the community. It's not fair to them. These kids are 12, 13, and 14 years old. They are carrying guns. They are carjacking innocent people. And when I talk to my son, just like the rest of his friends, they don't care. They're not scared. And they do not care. That's just not normal. These are 15-year-old children that don't want to go to school. That's all they want to do is commit crime. Yes, I have a parent group that I'm leading that started from the sheriff's office called Parents Against Children Committing Crime. But it's hard to get parents to come to the table because whatever they got going on in their environment, they are kind of scared that their children are going to die in police custody, but that's why I'm here to be the bridge to let them know that we cannot think like that no more. Our kids need help. If we do not get the help and resources, we need to hold the kids accountable to be in a healing center for, you said 3 to 6 months, I say 12 to 24 to 36 months because what I'm experiencing, the 3 to 6 months is not working for my child. He's 15, he keeps doing the same thing. And when you ask him, he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't care. This is not normal. We need help. The legislature, please, can you help us before it gets bad? We have another generation that's coming up. And now these kids that are 10, 11, and 12, they think it's okay to carjack and carry guns. It has been a culture in the urban community that we need to corrupt. We need probation officers, the law enforcement, other agencies that are for here to help us. Where is the help? I did an interview in 2019. I'm screaming the same thing. We need help, resources that are going to hold our children accountable to get healing and rewired their brain.
Great. Awesome. Don't go anywhere because everybody's going to have questions for you. You'll see on the 4th page of this letter a number of things that were agreed upon in one part of the legislature or the other. The helicopter, I have to tell you, back to catching them, having the State Patrol helicopter up there is the most valuable tool we have in law enforcement. There was funding for that as well. There was community policing dollars, ambassadors that would work with a local department that would be out on the streets on a regular basis. I mean, it wasn't rocket science. We worked hard to get good stuff passed. And now it's been 5 months since that failed. I think true leadership in legislative action is someone, the governor, the leadership, should have been working on this problem for the last 5 months so that we could, there's no reason, they said, we were 2 days away from reaching some agreement. Well, if in fact we were 2 days away from reaching agreement, we've had, what's 5 times 30? 150 days since they could have reached an agreement. So I think this is a unique opportunity to get people to say, yes, we're willing to have a special session after the election. Clearly, there's been the politics of why they didn't want to up until now. Let's put politics aside the day after the election and get some funding dedicated. It doesn't have to be all issues. Some of those issues can wait until July. Crime can't wait. We cannot wait. We are drowning right now. And the worst is Minneapolis. We owe it to the citizens of Minneapolis and the rest of the metro to help them combat that problem before it gets worse. And Mike, how many, I know they're trying to hire 300. How many have they been able to hire in a class?
They can't even hire a class of 50.
Yeah, I think they had like 20 the last time.
Correct.
So Minneapolis is struggling, and they're trying to hire 300 and they end up hiring 20. In fact, they're leaving as fast as they're coming in. So we need some incentives to help Minneapolis. And as so goes Minneapolis, will go. So we mentioned the bill. It's in the letter here about secure housing for juveniles in Ramsey County. And not everybody agrees on opening Totem Town again, but they do agree that we can do some secure housing where they get intensive treatment and wraparound services for up to 35 kids. And that's a bill that we proposed last year. So with that, come on in here a little closer. Questions? Any questions?
John and Tisha, if you could sit down with the governor and legislative leadership, right? If you could sit down with the governor and the political leaders of the Capitol, sit down across the table from them, what would you tell them looking at them directly in the eyes?
Come a little closer to the mic there. Either one of you. Yeah, both of you.
I would tell them that we're not safe. And if we don't do something in the next 90 days, we are going to be living in a bloodbath with our children taking over the community because they think it's okay. It's a culture.
Yeah, I'd echo that same thing. We need to take action now. We've been waiting way too long. Our streets are not safe. We have the money to do it. Let's put the partisan thing aside and get it done.
Bob, if you could take one or two things off that list, like you said, you can't get everything, right?
Yeah.
What would be the top two things that you would like to see if the special session even happened?
Yeah. The top thing for me is money to actually put a group of officers together that can catch and apprehend the offenders. That's the top priority. Nothing else works if we're not able to apprehend them. And they're crossing jurisdictional lines. They're fleeing every single night. They're fleeing from us in pursuits. Hopefully we have the helicopter up. If not, we try to catch them other ways. But these are a ring of auto thieves, carjackers. Every night they're fleeing. And number one is to have the resources to apprehend them. Number two is the resources to detain them and put juveniles in some type of treatment facility. A secure facility for juveniles is number two. We can argue about the politics of the prosecutor's office and the judges later, but right now the judges will tell you, we don't have an option locally. There's no place to put these kids. And that's one of the reasons they're being released. I mean, her kid, I know her kid, he is one of the most dangerous children on the street when he's running wild. He's a great kid when he's not. But she was just on a Zoom call right here with your son's court over in Hennepin County. They wanted to let him out last week, and she talked him into keeping him.
Yes.
He's on a probation violation. But I can tell you, I can bring another 6 mothers in just like her. I talked to them all. The juvenile justice system is failing. And if we don't fix that, Jay, so that's number 2.
So your goal would be not to wait till the legislative session, because what you're saying is by the time that budget gets passed, you're looking at May, June, July, right?
That's correct.
You're saying elections November 8th, let's do a special session in November, get the money out right away.
Fund us through July 1st at a minimum, if you want to argue about the rest of the money later. But fund law enforcement through July 1st. There's a lot of good things that can happen. Here's the problem. She has another son. How old is Giovanni?
Giovanni's 14.
14. Her other son is right at that point of deciding what kind of life am I going to lead. Am I going to listen to mom or am I going to listen to my brother? And we're seeing that everywhere. No one's surprised anymore when I tell you these carjackers range from 13 to 15, right? That used to be a surprise 2 years ago. Well, now we're getting desensitized to that concept. There's another generation of 13 to 15-year-olds that are following in the footsteps of the kids that have been doing this for the last 2 years. We need to stem that culture of these young kids thinking this is the best option. And we can do it. I mean, let's face it, COVID, the pandemic, no school, all of that contributed to where we're at. But the violent crime trends in the metro area started in August of 2019, before COVID started and before George Floyd was murdered. This is a trend that started before May of 2020. So let's not blame it on anything else than our own inability to deal with it. And the final thing is this constant refrain that you're hearing from politicians, not all, well, it's this way everywhere in America. Stop, stop, stop. It doesn't have to be. It does not have to be here in Minnesota. Other questions?
Republican Senate leaders have tried to tack on other pieces as a condition for coming in for a special session. Have you asked them directly to do public safety only in a special session?
Well, they received, Leader Miller and Warren Limmer received a copy of my letter. I have not talked to them today or about this letter, but they know how I feel about the importance of a special session. I've made it clear working with them, and I worked very closely with them on the Senate bill. The Senate bill had a lot of great things in it. There were things in the House bill that we liked as well. Worked with Carlos and Kelly Moeller and Speaker Hortman. We were up there nonstop trying to get something out of the legislature. I don't know what they're attempting to tack on, but I will tell you this, the game changes after the election, right? Because now you know who is and isn't. And it's in everyone's interest to give us 9 months worth of funding between now and July to help us get a start on this problem.
Are you optimistic that the temperature will cool down at that point?
I am. I'm optimistic, and I wanted to start the discussion before the election so that people should think this through and agree. And actually, they should ask them all, are you willing to have a special session? And let's at least get them to say, well, we're glad to consider it, right? And let's face it, they're all wondering who's going to win and lose. But when it comes to this issue, politics has got to be put to the side. Mm-hmm. We're just, I've had Republicans tell me this is a bad idea to have this press conference, and I've had Democrats tell me this is a bad idea to have press conference. Guess what? It's not about you guys. It's about the victims. The 700 to 3 to 4 carjacking victims every single day in the metro area that go through what his wife went through. And it's not about your politics. It's about the victims. So that's why we're here. Sometimes we accuse our prosecutors of not caring about the victims or the suspects more. But I'm just telling you, this has got to be our top priority. People like John's wife, because it's happening every day. And we're passionate about what we do. We've been doing this for many years. Other questions?
I would
Sure.
like to mention
Why have the
something.
politicians that was a bad idea as far as the press conference, as far as the timing, or?
Well, everybody has a different theory about how this impacts the election. You know, some people say, well, this is going to give this governor an opportunity to lead, or this is going to make the Democrats look like, you know, there's never a good time during an election for any issue, right? So this isn't about politics. This is about politics have held us up from actually using $12 billion in surplus to fight crime in Minnesota. So I don't know how it impacts the election. And frankly, that's not why we're here. We're trying to impact the safety of Minnesota after the election.
Do you have any local statistics statistics for the increases in violent crime just over the last month or so, as you talk about that increase that you were seeing?
Well, most of the increase we're concerned about is in Minneapolis, to be candid. We have a group of 10 deputies that are out there every day chasing and arresting these most violent criminals. So we've been able to suppress our numbers internally, but Minneapolis has not. And this Project Endeavor, Sergeant Schroeder is one of the finest police officers around. Project Endeavor in Minneapolis is a great concept, but if you talk to Minneapolis officers that are being redeployed, you will find out they cannot keep that pace up past the holidays. They're going to be burned out. They already said that. They're working overtime, they're changing jobs, other things are not getting done. I can't stress, I've done this for 45 years. When you don't have enough resources to combat the problem, you're going to lose. And 300 is a huge number. Huge. And we're probably over there in Minneapolis on a nightly basis. We're lucky if we run into a squad. So, they're going to have to rapidly hire, and they're going to have help from the legislature. Huge incentives to be a Minneapolis officer. Let's all try to save that city. And there are a lot of politicians that say the opposite. Oh, let Minneapolis slip into the abyss. That's not good for anybody.
Who's the elected officials? How many letters were sent out?
A dozen to the leadership. So the Senate leadership, the members of the public safety committees, House leadership. So Miller, Limmer, Carlos Mariani, Kelly Moeller, Paul Novotny, Melissa Hortman, and a couple others that were been pro-law enforcement.
And they just went out today, right? So
Yeah, this morning.
No response.
They were delivered this morning, and many of them received electronically a letter as well.
Any response? Really?
No response that I'm aware of yet, but I haven't really been checking the emails. So, but I hope you'll ask them. Go to the governor. I know the governor's office is aware. One of his aides contacted one of our aides and said the governor's tracking what you're doing. So, questions?
Sheriff, what are the crime trends in the contract cities that your office patrols?
Our contract city crime trends are not bad. However, you're aware of the carjacking that we had in Shoreview, Arden Hills just 3 weeks ago. That's a great case. It's being prosecuted federally, but it's a great example how Mike's carjacking unit was able to put together and get him charged. Now picture this. A woman is carjacked at 6:30 in the morning in a garage, gun to her head, and she's taken to Minneapolis. She's forced to use her ATM to draw out $1,500, multiple attempts. He leaves her and walks across the park in Minneapolis, and poof, we have no fingerprints. He has blue gloves on. We solved the case. Here's how we solve it. We went over there. We grabbed video from everywhere around the car. We were able to find the suspect that matched the description. We followed the video of the suspect. We published it on Facebook to get people to help us identify who he was. We got several people that helped us identify the victim. We found his new address by methodically working through other possibilities, staked out his apartment, and arrested him when he came out walking a dog. None of that work gets done anywhere but at the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office. Why? Because no one has the resources to dedicate. How many people worked that case?
We probably had 12 people working full-time on that case.
That's one carjacking case. And so you say, how is it? Our closer ring suburbs like Little Canada experience more crime, but we're seeing it in Shoreview, we're seeing it in Arden Hills, we're seeing it in White Bear Township. We've had carjackings ourselves in those jurisdictions as well. So, thank you very much for coming. And one more thing. If you want a little good soundbite, the godfather of fighting crime, the oldest licensed law enforcement officer who's still licensed, Bill Finney, Chief Bill Finney, who is one of our undersheriffs here, is in the back of the room. If you haven't met him or haven't seen him for a while, get some sound bites from him because he can tell you he's seen it all. What year did you start, Bill?
69.
69. So you got me by 8 years there. He's over 50, over half a century of fighting crime. So Chief Bill Finney. And did you want to say one more thing?
Yes, something I want to explain how bad it is where these kids think it's okay. So when they watch Bob on live, they get street credit from other juveniles to say how many times they took Bob on a high-speed chase and how many times they crashed a car. It's not okay. These kids think it's a game. And everyone really needs to take it serious. I'm a mother, and I know what my sons and the rest of the kids talk about. They get stripes and clout for stealing cars. And they go by how many times you stole the key or how many times you stole the Tesla. So it's become a like weird kind of game for these kids. So they're not taking it serious. I'm telling you, they're not. We really need to pay attention to what we're saying. We need help, please. Resources, treatment.
John, closing comment?
Yeah, again, we need the resources. We need to support our officers. We have the money. Let's do it now. I don't want to hear another story of another mother, anybody getting carjacked or being a victim like this. To have children, mothers, whoever get carjacked is just not okay. Let's bring Minnesota back. Let's use our funds, and let's make this Minnesota back to what we know it used to be. So I really appreciate you pulling this together.
Thank you. Sorry for your trauma. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you coming.